Hello students, before we start up the next lesson, that is we are not afraid to die if we can all be together, I just wanted to teach you something about the parts of a ship. Okay, so let me tell you that this is the front part, this is the bow. Okay, and let me show the rear here, which is called the stern. Okay, the right side of the ship. How do we know which is the right side? Obviously we will see from the bow. Okay, so this is the right side, which is called the starboard side, and the left side is called the port side. Then we have the mast. Mast is this rod. This rod is called the mast. Okay, and then we have boom. Boom is this rod. Okay, this rod which is the base to the sail. And then anything else which we need to know here, jib sail. Here basically a jib sail. These are sails which helps in giving a direction. And then we have hull. Hull is basically this part of the ship, which is the foundation of the ship. This lesson is a thrilling narrative of how Gordon Cook and his family take up a voyage and how they had a close shave. But let me tell you first, why did they start off sea voyage? Gordon Cook wanted to have his dream fulfilled. And what was his dream? His dream was to duplicate the round the world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. And for this journey, Gordon Cook was quite prepared. So they spent around 16 years of their lives in honing their seafaring skills. Now, what does seafaring skill mean? Seafaring skill means that traveling by sea, and honing means chiseling or sharpening or improving. So they improved their seafaring skills. So they prepared a lot for this journey. They were not ill prepared, we get to know. They even paid attention to the boat they were to start voyage on. So the name of the boat was Wave Walker, a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden hulled beauty. And this boat was also tested in the roughest of the weathers so that it can be durable in those toughest moments. So Gordon Cook, along with his family, start off their journey, this memorable and incredible journey, in July 1976. So the first phase of their journey was quite pleasant. They sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town, and then they take on the board two crewmen, Larry Vigil, an American, and Herb Sigler, a Swiss. Then they start off to the roughest seas, that is the southern Indian Ocean. They have the first signs of impending danger when they face these strong winds on the second day out of the Cape Town. These winds didn't bother them, but it was the big, huge size of waves which bothered them. The huge, enormous sea rolled towards them. It dropped the storm jib, lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. And what is a storm jib? A jib or a sail which is used in storm to reduce the area of sail. It is helpful in resisting the storm. They attached the lifelines donned on the oilskins and life jackets. So life jackets are jackets which help in keeping a person afloat in the water. So lifelines means basically the ropes which will help them to hold on. At 6 p.m. on 2nd January, the sky became absolutely dark and there was a rolling roar. The narrator saw enormous cloud that towered aft the ship. Aft means which was behind the ship. With horror, he realizes that it was not a cloud, but a wave like no other, and it was perfectly vertical. The water was turbulent, and so was the ship, which was tossing up and down in the sea by the storm. And the next moment, this huge wave struck the ship. There was a big explosion at the deck. And what is the deck? You can see in the pic. The waves washed the narrator out of the ship and he was thrown overboard in the huge turbulent sea. Obviously, the narrator knew that he was going to die, there were no chances. And he also saw Wave Walker turning upside down. And the next moment, the wave hurled means pushed the Wave Walker straight. And for the narrator also, his head miraculously comes out of the water and he tries and comes up and boards the ship. The ship is tossed like a toy by the huge waves, and so is the narrator who is on the deck, is thrown like a doll here and there. The narrator suffered many injuries, like his left ribs were cracked, his mouth was filled with blood, and he had broken teeth. There was water everywhere on the ship. There was water everywhere on the ship. The decks were broken and there were huge holes on the deck and the water seeped in the cabins. Larry and Herb, the crewmen, were helping in pumping out the water from the ship. So all the broken pieces of the deck were sloshing like in a water bottle. The water sloshes when you just shake like that. The ship, the water was sloshing, and so were the wreckage. The narrator right away goes into the children's cabin and asks the children if they were all right. He saw his daughter had a huge bump on her head, but he didn't have any time to attend to her. So he takes some hammer and screws and canvas and goes back on the deck where the starboard side was damaged and it was open, all open. So he wanted to, repair those gaping holes, big holes which were there in the deck so that the water is not further seeped in the cabins. And if the water is there on the ship, obviously they would surely sink. So he uses this canvas to, patch the gaping holes and fixes it with those nails and screws and hammer. Meanwhile, Larry and Vigil were busy in taking out the water through pumping out the water through the pumps. Their troubles increased when their hand pumps got choked and couldn't because of the debris. The debris got stuck in it. The electric pump which was used for taking out the water was short circuited. So they didn't have any choice. The extra hand pumps were basically, washed by the waves and were twisted beyond repair and washed by waves in the water. Jib, the sail, and the dinghies, all and the main anchor was washed by the waves. Then he remembers another electric pump which was kept in the chart room. Chart room is basically the map room in which the maps are there for the ship to navigate the sea. They even did the Mayday calls. Mayday calls are basically calls of emergency to rescue them. Did not get any replies to their Mayday calls because of being in the remote corner of the world. The daughter had many injuries, like a swollen head and two enormous blackened eyes, and of course, deep cuts on her arm. And when the narrator asked why didn't she inform about her injuries before, she replies that she didn't want to bother her father because he was busy saving all of them. Though the water was under control, but there was a big leak somewhere below the water level. So he goes underwater and inspects the ship and finds out that the, the starboard side of the ship was damaged beyond repairs. Though the narrator knew that they would not be surviving too long in that damaged ship, so they needed to find the nearest land so that they can be saved. Then he finds out through his calculation that two small islands were few hundred kilometers far from their position. One of them was Isle Amsterdam, which was a French scientific base, and it was really a hopeless situation because those two islands were like pinpricks in the vast ocean. That means they were very small dots in the big ocean, the enormous ocean. On 4th January, the weather was still turbulent. It was atrocious. When he went to meet his children and comfort his children that day, his son Jonathan innocently asked that whether they were going to die, and rather bravely added that they were not afraid to die if they were together. These words were inspiration for him, and rather he was determined that he will save his family from that grim situation they were in. Meanwhile, his daughter Sue had made caricatures of Mary and the narrator so as to make the grim situation lighter. It was really an overwhelming card which she made for her parents to thank them and to hope for the best. So determined by the brave face of his children, he decided that he will leave no stone unturned to save his family. He did all the calculations and told Larry to steer 185-degree so that they can reach that island, Isle Amsterdam. Did not get any replies to their mayday calls because of being in the remote corner of the world. The daughter had many injuries, like a swollen head and two enormous blackened eyes, and of course, deep cuts on her arm. And when the narrator asked why didn't she inform about her injuries before, she replies that she didn't want to bother her father because he was busy saving all of them. Though the water was under control, but there was a big leak somewhere below the water level. So he goes underwater and inspects the ship and finds out that the, the starboard side of the ship was damaged beyond repairs. Though the narrator knew that they would not be surviving too long in that damaged ship, so they needed to find the nearest land so that they can be saved. Then he finds out through his calculation that two small islands were few hundred kilometers far from their position. One of them was Isle Amsterdam, which was a French scientific base, and it was really a hopeless situation because these small islands were like pinpricks in the vast ocean, as if small dots in the vast ocean. The weather was still turbulent on 4th Jan, And when the narrator went that day to meet his children were right in front of him, and his son was asking for a hug. He couldn't understand the gesture of the children, but it was Sue who just informed her father that they have found the island. The narrator was quite amazed and astonished at, at the news which he had just received. And he rushed to the deck and could see the Isle Amsterdam, the bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetations, but still the most beautiful island in the world. Why does he call that a bleak island, a black island as beautiful? Because that was a ray of hope for them that they will live and would not die. So he was thankful to everybody, whether it was Larry or Virgil or his wife, and mostly the children who had shown such a courage in such a distressful situation. So it was the children who held to the hope even when the adults had given up. And we get to know that his daughter Sue had to undergo 6 minor operations to cure that blood clot which she suffered in that dangerous voyage of theirs.